President.
The Honourable Steve Whan.
Mr President, my question is to the Minister for Roads and Ports in his capacity as Minister representing the Minister for Primary Industries. Minister, in your pre-election fisheries policy, you promised a structural reform program that would be voluntary, about better environmental outcomes and better for the fishing industry. Minister, fishing business owners are now expressing concerns that they will be forced to adopt a share management system which will impose an unrealistic economic burden, in some cases possibly forcing them to purchase 8 times their current shareholdings to maintain their viability. Minister, will you give a commitment that the government will only agree to a system that will not impose an unreasonable financial burden on active operators within the New South Wales fishing industry?
I thank the honourable member for those comments, and I acknowledge them because they are absolutely pertinent. Mr President, this fellow lives in a parallel universe. He has forgotten about the hatred from the fishing industry for the disintegration of the industry that happened under his watch, Mr President. Mr President, we made commitments for a better industry and the Minister is putting those in place. Mr President, this man talks about promises, but he doesn't want to accept the promises.
Order. The Honourable Steve Whan on a point of order.
Mr President, 45 seconds. The Minister has debated the question, and I'd ask you to bring him to the point of the question and to answering a very important issue for commercial fishers in New South Wales.
There's no point of order. Minister.
Thank you, Mr President. Mr President, there were 2 key points to his question. One was about election promises and the other about what the Minister was doing. Now, Mr President, I'd answered one part of it, and I was about to talk about the other part, because he asked a question, Mr President, about election promises. And, Mr President, if ALP members had their way, we would pay for...
Order. The Honourable Steve Whan.
Overall tax take and some more
Mr
debt.
President,
Order.
on relevance.
The Honourable Steve Whan on a point
On
of order.
relevance, Mr President, the question is very clearly about the commercial fishing reforms in New South Wales, and for the Minister to go on his bombastic way with those comments is completely against the purpose of the question. I ask him to draw in order.
The Honourable member should sit down. He's making debating points in his point of order. The Minister has the call.
Mr President, the honourable member talks about election promises. And Mr President, here we are. If the ALP members would have their way, we would do all these promises and we would pay for it with an increased overall tax take and some more debt. We'd replace stamp duty with a progressive, broad-based land
on a
tax.
point of order. Minister,
It's all your own words.
Minister will resume his seat.
Mr President, my point of order is relevance. The question was about the government's pre-election fisheries policy and when the government was going to implement it. I'd ask you to bring him back to the question.
It seems the Minister is starting to stray from what's generally relevant to what he was asked about. Minister.
Mr President, in response to the independent report into the Commercial Fisheries Policy Management and Administration commissioned by the government in 2011, a comprehensive reform program was developed. The key components of our reform program include structural adjustments to address the problems of poorly defined fishing rights and excess capacity. This will ensure that ownership of fishing entitlements is better linked to the level of access to the resource. Reforming the consultation approach to deliver effective processes and structures that will promote coordinated advice, communication and feedback between government and industry, and reforming the government's arrangements to achieve a proper balance of responsibilities and accountabilities within government and industry to build confidence in decision-making. Mr President, these changes are essential for the long-term viability and profitability of the industry as a whole. And, Mr President, the government is willing to make the hard decisions that need to be made in order to secure a more effective long-term future for the industry. Mr President, there is nothing different in that from what...
Order. The Honourable Steve Whan on a supplementary question.
Mr President, can the Minister elucidate his answer in particular to give fishers a reassurance that in moving to a share-linked fishery, they will not suffer because of underutilised shares that are out there at the moment, forcing actual active fishermen to purchase a lot more shares to continue in the industry.
Is it in order, Mr. President?
Hasn't got a clue.
No, I'm just asking.
Hasn't got a clue.
Well,
The Honourable Linda Volz on a point of order.
Mr. President, if people want to question the validity of a question, they should take a point of order on the question that's asked.
You don't have to. President.
I'm willing to accept the President's ruling.
In deference to the Deputy Leader of the Government, he's quite right in pointing to the fact that the President is entitled to rule on whether a question is within the standing orders without a point of order being taken, but that nevertheless doesn't derogate from what the Honourable Linda Volz said, which is that there was no point of order before the Chair. It is sometimes a little difficult for the Chair to assess whether it is seeking the elucidation of a part of an answer that was given, or whether it in fact is a new question. But on this occasion I'll give the member the benefit of the doubt, and if the Minister wishes to answer, it's his prerogative.
Mr. President, I'm more than happy to answer. I'm informed that under share linkage, a consultation process involving all shareholders has been undertaken to consider how shares should be linked to resource access. There have been several meetings with working group to options, and engagement by the industry has been constructive. Final options are currently being drafted and will be open for comment by all shareholders and the public shortly. There he is, the scaremonger, out there again putting his own spin on it. Mr. President, no wonder they shunned him out of Madeira and put him on the losers' lounge.
Order. The Minister will resume his seat.
Mr. President.
Order. Minister's in time in any case that has expired.